Speaker view. All right. Welcome everyone to the practice debate for NSDA team. Team 2 and Team 5 will debate today. The Team 5 consists of Rashid, Dhruv, and Vineet. The Team 2 consists of Ved, Amrita, and Vyas will debate on the motion this House would ban selling of guns to citizens. And with that, let me invite the first speaker. Vineet, Rashid, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, here it goes. 3, 2, 1. Here.
Greetings, everyone. I'll be the first speaker today on behalf of the proposition side. The motion proposed by our side for today's debate is the banning of guns. For the sake of clarity, I'd like to take this opportunity of defining the keywords of the motion. The word ban here refers to the legal prohibition of something, in this case, the selling of guns. We define guns as a ranged weapon that is designed to use a shooting tube designed to launch projectiles. These projectiles are so harmful they possess the ability to kill many animals, including humans. These guns are also designed in a way that they're supposed to be lethally harmful, i.e., they're designed to kill people. Moreover, for the purposes of this motion, a citizen is defined as any person who is a member of a particular country and who has rights because of being born there, or because of being given rights, or a person who lives in a particular town or city. In this definition, we do not include individuals who have been recognized by the law to discharge duties that require the carrying of lethal firearms, for example, the members of the military and the police officers. Moreover, I'd like to clarify that for all POIs in regards to this speech, I would request everyone to type them out in the chat box, and I would reply to them in the last minute, i.e., from the 7 to 8 minutes. We'd like to share some of the statistics that motivated us to propose this motion. According to Amnesty International, 1.4 million people have died as a result of gun violence between 2012 and 2016 all over the world. In 2018, 74% of homicides were due to firearms in America. Just imagine this thought. You could have saved 74% of all homicides in America in a whole year by just removing guns from our own streets. Over the past few years, gun violence has risen to the forefront of public consciousness. Much of the debate has focused on gun regulation and keeping deadly weapons out of the hands of potential killers, but particularly those with mental illnesses. Unfortunately, far less attention has been dedicated to the impact of gun violence on victims. While individuals killed and injured in atrocities such as Sandy Hook and Aurora theater shootings are publicly remembered and mourned, victims of the tragedies are not limited to these men, women, and children killed. The consequences of gun violence are more pervasive and affect entire communities, families, and children. With more than 25% of children witnessing an act of violence in their homes, schools, or community over the past year, and more than 5% witnessing a shooting. It becomes just not just an issue of gun regulation, but also of addressing the impact on those who have been traumatized by such violence. For example, nowadays it is nearly impossible for a year to go by without a school shooting taking place in the USA, one of the countries with the highest rate of gun violence. A school, the place which should be reserved for education and knowledge. A school should be a place which is reserved for education and knowledge. Yet now it has become a place to where children have to go through drills and be taught what to do in case a gun shooter comes into our school. Gun violence is a contemporary global human rights issue. Gun related violence threatens our most fundamental human right, the right to life. One of our primary reasons for advocating for a ban on guns is the right to life and the fact that individual security can't come at the cost of danger to society in general. The argument that people require devices to protect themselves is rational and justified, for it holds basis in perhaps our most fundamental right, the right to life. However, the argument that this very device, which is supposed to protect our lives, is capable of taking the lives of others as well, is irrational. We cannot grant citizens the ability to hold devices that can protect themselves, but then also grant them the ability to snatch away the fundamental rights of others, especially the right to life. Moreover, the founding fathers of legislature around the world that has advocated for the right to bear arms, they did not anticipate the conditions of future society. They did not think that people would be so hateful and that violence would be so prevalent among the societies. We must recognize the fact that society is not what the founders of the founders of the of the founders of amendments like the Second Amendment in the USA of such a legislature imagine this to be. They imagined a world where people would live in peace and harmony and would only use firearms as a means to protection, not as a means to cause harm. It is important. It is important to establish why the current liberal view on gun control of universal background checks does not extend far enough. Several studies have found that while universal background checks can ensure that some people cannot buy guns of their own, they do not have an impact on gun deaths. For example, a study on the effect of comprehensive background checks repeals by Indian and Tennessee found that repeals led to no statistically significant change in gun violence theory. The problem is that it is quite difficult to impose background checks that are thorough enough, leaving a wide range of loopholes. Additionally, background checks don't account for how criminals actually get their guns. A Bureau of Justice Statistics survey found that only 10% of criminals who used the gun in their offense obtained it from a retail source. This is exactly why we propose a ban. Instead of going to the bureaucracy of having a background check and slowing down the administrative process, we propose an outright ban itself. However, keep in mind that there's another reason why we advocate for a ban on gun selling. We believe flooding society with lethal firearms is counterintuitive to the efforts of societal safety. As I talked about earlier, people have a right to life and the right to feel safe as well. Imagine living in a neighborhood where everyone has a gun. We're not feeling safe. We might expect these individuals to behave rationally. We might expect them not to use their guns. We might expect them to use guns in a responsible way. But that does not happen so often, does it? We often see that individuals abuse the power they're granted as a means of possessing guns, and that they often use guns to cause harm to society. We also know excuse me. We also notice that gun holders are not often rational. We notice that they seek pleasure by utilizing guns. We see that these people, although they might not use guns to harm humans, they might use guns to harm animals, which is equally detrimental to our ecosystem. I'd also like to shed light on the fact that in our proposition, we also propose that we ban sales only on guns that are designed to kill, and that this proposition will still allow for the sale of other safety devices like airsoft guns. Airsoft guns are proven to be largely effective for defending a citizen's safety, and at the same time are designed to be non-lethal. To conclude, I believe that we should ban guns while providing citizens the access to other means of safety. As Dianne Feinstein once said, banning gun addresses a fundamental right of all Americans to feel safe. Thank you. And with that, I would like to accept POIs from the opposition side.
Thank you. The speaker themselves mentioned that only 10% of criminals get it from the retail stores or legal methods. So by banning guns, you are actually allowing for a greater black market to foster. Since you yourself said only 10% get it from the legal source, what help is going to banning guns prevent that other 90% from still getting it from illegal means?
Good question. So first of all, I'd like to address that 10% in itself is a huge reduction. Instead of 100 people dying, you have now 90 people dying. And while that is a very that you might call it a statistic view, it's numerically it's better. Secondly, when we say a ban on selling guns, we do not only to the methods of retail sale. We also mean the black market, where investigation bureaus like the police in the America, the FBI, in India say the Metro. Those can be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. With that, let me invite this first speaker of team opposition. Ved, are you ready?
Right, sir, I'm ready. Now, before starting my speech, I would like to clarify that I'm the first speaker of the opposition team and I'll be taking my POIs verbally, so you can interrupt me and ask POIs. Now, okay, starting my time at 3, 2, 1. Now, essentially, I as the first speaker, describe this stance of our house as against banning guns in general. Now, very simply, talking about the characterization of guns in general by the proposition team, we deem it to find unreasonable because they define guns as being inherently bad, whereas our definition encompasses of guns referring to as firearms are available and mandated for commercial use and which can be used for both protection or violence as being inherently good or bad based on the user there, right? And we define our stakeholders as the general public who live in areas that are not so safe, people who live in bad psychological conditions, people who are victims of abuse or violence or bullying. Now, talking about a status quo here, we defined the status quo by three major characterizations. One being the nations where guns are available for commercial use, but they're not properly regulated by the US. There are regulations, but they're not properly regulated. Second, being the nations where guns are not legally sold, but the thriving black market exists there. The third, there being several major and small cities of the world where the crime is on the rise and people feel essentially unsafe. So that being said, and the status quo being defined, I would like to move on to one essential rebuttal, a small rebuttal. Now, essentially, the proposition mentioned that gun violence and gun deaths, they can be solved by removing guns from the street, which is inherently not possible. The proposition is of the belief that banning guns would essentially remove them from the street. However, as mentioned by my fellow team speaker, that a thriving black market still exists. Even in a country where selling guns is outlawed, gun violence is prevalent. So essentially, that assumption and that argument is flawed in that sense. Now, moving on to our two major substantive arguments. Not right now. Two major substantive arguments and a policy model that we will be proposing. Very firstly goes the self-defense argument. Now, we have two sides to this argument here. Now, people essentially feel unsafe in many major cities due to rising crime and violence in their neighborhood. That is the one side. And the second side being that they are, due to rising nature of crime, the law enforcement, essentially they're overworked, they are underfunded, and they are not able to respond on time. And this in unintentional efficiency of the law enforcement authorities, the criminal elements do feel advantageous. So public essentially is all the more unsafe there, and they require the need for self-defense there. And this also inherently goes to the relates to the right to life, right against violence, essentially. So our model basically focuses on not banning guns, but essentially a stringent regulatory model, which we'll be emphasizing on further. Now, essentially, proposition believes that the school shootings will be solved by will not happen more by essentially banning guns, by removing the gun factor from there. Now, essentially taking example of the recent school shootings in the United States of America. Now, essentially from multiple surveys and censuses, the general conclusion has been that the root cause behind those school shootings, the reason what motivated those children to actually go and kill others, to perpetrate violence through guns, is because they've been bullied, because they've been facing abuse both in the school, both at homes, domestic abuse, and essentially that relates to their psychological condition and how it has manifested in the form of violence through guns. So essentially not right now, after finishing this argument. So essentially two parameters come into play here. One being the mental health parameter, and second being the psychological circumstances. So essentially, the proposition fails to address the root cause of school shootings here, but essentially they focus on taking the gun factor, which will not solve school shootings in general. I'll be taking POIs after finishing our essential policy model here. So our model essentially focuses on prevention through regulation. Now, here, what the proposition argued about a rational user not being present always, we determine whether a rational user is here. We agree with the proposition that background checks are not always comprehensive and not always possible, but we propose additional measures there. We propose that there be psychological tests for users willing to buy guns. There be that renewal of licenses be at shorter periods of time, at 6 months. There be comprehensive background checks, the essential validity and the comprehensiveness of those background checks be increased. We believe that while the civilian population has the right to bear firearms to protect themselves, there also are certain obligations that the state has to impose on the citizens buying the firearms to essentially create a safer society for all. Now, countries here do not need to follow the same model, but the principle remains the same. Now, second part of our essential model goes not right now. Let me finish my model. Second part of our essential model goes towards gun awareness programs at school levels and at community levels. We propose that gun awareness and that proper gun awareness be ingrained into the curriculums of schools, into general awareness raising and community outreach programs, so that where the gun use is out there, we can turn them into we can turn them towards a more rational thinking of gun use, and essentially let them retain their right to self defense, at the same time making them essentially rational uses that. Now, the third argument here being, the third part of a model here being mental health interventions and counseling to address the essential root cause behind the gun violence prevalent, and thereby believing that guns not being as the root cause there, the essential psychological trauma or psychological abuse faced by the perpetrators of gun violence, the opposition believes to address that root cause and essentially address and prevent the manifestation of issues such as bullying and abuse in the form of violence. Any POIs will take now.
So my first POI would be that you are saying that if I am a person who is being facing abuse and trauma, I've been given a right to take someone's life. Because we are the proposition side. Wait for me to finish. Because we are the proposition side are saying that if that child of the recent Texas shooting you are talking about, that child faced abuse, right? But at the same time, if we do not allow him to carry guns, that abuse is wrong. But killing people is far more worse than it. So how are you even justifying?
I got your question. Right. So the proposition misunderstood our argument here. Essentially, our argument is that that any child perpetrating or doing gun violence or shooting someone is the trauma or the psychological abuse involved there. The manifestation of it comes in the form of violence through guns. So essentially, it does not validate that or grant it a legal status, the using gun on and killing other people. But what it does is that we essentially discover a root cause behind why the child has done that, and we can use that to ensure to make further preventive measures, so that essentially no child resorts to such manifestation of violence through guns, and there are other more better and safe mechanisms for the child to essentially let that trauma and be bullying be addressed in a more safer, more regulatory environment there. Yes.
Another POI.
Sure.
Okay, so you are talking that you are gonna go on the root cause of those psychological abuse and everything. Did you know that that child is gonna go into the school and kill people? How are you gonna find out who is gonna become the next terrorist?
So essentially, those are what preventive measures are, right? Okay. Now, essentially, there are two populations involved here. One is the child population, other is this other civilian population of the age of 18. Now, when we essentially talk about child, it essentially gets covered in a third part of the policy model, which is mental health interventions and counseling, coupled with gun awareness programs at both the school level and the community level. So essentially, that is the preventive measure that we impose there. Now, the second preventive measure that we impose at the community level, at the level for the civilians above 18, that is stringent gun regulation that not only involves comprehensive background checks, but also involves psychological tests, renewing license at 6 months periods, and essentially many such things to determine the rational user here. So that would be answering your POI. And lastly, so we stand against banning sale of guns, and we believe that banning guns won't reduce gun violence, and that stringent regulation is the way here. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. With that, let me invite the second speaker of team proposition, Dhruv. Dhruv, are you ready?
Sir, I'm not able to switch on my camera. Is that okay if my camera is off for today? I'll ensure that this doesn't happen on the main debate. Is that fine?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Let's start. 3, 2, 1, start.
Hello, everyone. I'm second speaker on behalf of the proposition side. I'll be first moving on to the rebuttals. Before that, I would want to say that I will be taking all the POIs after I'm done with my speech. I'll mention it, or you could put it in the chat. I won't be accepting them while I'm speaking. So moving on to the rebuttal, I couldn't disagree with my worthy opponents more. What the first opposition basically said was that law enforcement agents, or police or whatever they are, they would not be able to control crime because of the efficiency levels, and as a result there's no public safety. But I would like to clearly mention that in our side we said we aren't banning all guns. We clearly mentioned that we are banning lethal guns and not non-lethal pellet guns. Basically, pellet guns are those which are made of rubber bullets. Pellet guns can significantly damage your opponent or the person who's in front of you or who's harming you. Pellet guns can go to the extent of even breaking bones, but they do not kill people. As far as it's concerned about an individual's safety or how secure they feel, pellet guns do fare equally well as normal guns. They're equally effective in ensuring that you are safe. Second thing is what the opponent mentioned was children shooting or the shooting in schools is due to bullying. So basically, bullying is a completely different issue, and because of the opponent mentioned that because of bullying, children are moving to these extremely violent measures like shootings. But on our side, when there are no guns, where will the child get the gun from? When there are no guns, the child will try to talk things out and get a better approach to deal with things rather than having this alternative open to them. The alternative of buying guns and going and killing people who you don't like is clearly closed in our case. Also, the opponent measured that they would take stringent control. But let me inform you that, as you mentioned, there is a black market, and we as a proposition definitely agree with that. But the thing, what you need to realize is that the black market also gets its guns and firearms from somewhere. There are individual suppliers, there are agents who get these guns for these sale organizations in the black market. But in our world, when guns are banned, and we try to implement this over a time of 6 months, gradually the guns manufactured in the US would be very, very less. As a result, the black market would also be deprived of the guns, and gradually the supply of guns to the black market and to the common people would decline. Also, whatever preventive measures you try and take, whether it is counseling or mental health sessions or whatever it is, there'll always be people who are not willing to accept these things or go to these extreme measures. Now I'll be moving on to my arguments or my speech. So nowadays, as my first speaker mentioned, it's nearly impossible for a year to go without shootings. So as he mentioned that according to the statistics, about 74% of homicides were due to firearms. Imagine the number of people who you could save when guns are banned. I think in 2017 and 2017, there were 15,000 people killed due to these mass shootings. Imagine majority of those lives could be saved if guns weren't so accessible as they were, or as they would be in the opposition's case. And as you've seen, gun violence is increasing day by day. So in our case, banning of guns would be beneficial to the whole community if you look at it in an overall perspective. Murders, homicides will decrease exponentially without compromising on the safety of people because of the pellet guns we are offering them. In our world, people will be safer due to the protection from muggings and home invasions and other attacks. Whereas in the opposition's case, guns could be bought by anyone. Nowadays, politicians are going to the extent of even removing licenses for guns just to gain political support. And because of that, gun violence would likely increase in the opposition's case, where as a result, so many people would be killed and there would be chaos. This is not something which the proposition can stand for. Literally imagine a world where innocent kids are killed for no fault of theirs. So many people are killed. What about the parents who have a constant fear in their mind regarding their children? In a world, our people have the peace of mind that a madman won't go and on a shooting spree and kill them or their loved ones. Our world prioritizes the right to safety over the free choice of people. In our side, also to mention, in our side, the government will have a complete monopoly on the control of guns, and as a result, the government will we'll have as I mentioned, during the 6-month time where there'll be an exchange of guns, our government, the government of the country, will take over or control the guns which people previously owned, the lethal guns which people previously owned, and in return hand them over with non-lethal guns like soft air guns or soft guns or pellet guns, like we mentioned. Hence, I would like to conclude my speech by saying that our side of the world has a much more significant advantage. We value lives over anything else. And at the same time, we give people a right to safety. We give them a right to protect themselves. And that's why I think as the second speaker of the proposition that our world will be much better. Hence, I would like to conclude my speech. Yup, I'm done. Okay, I'll accept one POI if there's time.
Thank you.
There is a time. Okay,
Okay,
you can continue.
Does the speaker recognize that we live in the 20th century, where even though they vehemently say that while all forms of regulation is impossible, we live in a world where psychological understanding is at its peak, where we have brain scans, understandings of people, where psychological studies can detect signs of psychosis and any forms of mental disorders at a very early stage. And furthermore, we are also imposing any forms of physical regulation and a 6-month renewal period for these guns, proving for extensive regulation. And despite this, you say regulation is not possible. Can you please justify that?
Okay, first of all, doing brain scans at such a large level is extremely difficult. You're not going to be reach out to so many. You're not going to be able to reach out to so many people and look at their brain scans and take extensive interviews and discuss them. That's even more difficult than the exchange that we mentioned. Also, you got something wrong. Our first speaker did not say 6 months of renewal period. He mentioned 1 year of renewal period for our pellet guns. So here, first of all, we are reducing the hassle of taking brain scans and all of that. We are not going into that stuff. And secondly, it's very difficult to identify all that. If it was already possible, why wouldn't people be doing it? And while handing over these lethal firearms, a person might seem very normal or might be in a proper mental state at the time of getting the gun. But as our minds change pretty quickly at this young age of the teenagers, your mind changes pretty quickly. What if they change their mind, or what if the bullying, like you mentioned, occurs later? What if they go on a shooting spree and kill the people? In our world, you don't even have guns. So even if they take pellet guns, they really can't kill people. So yeah, I think this is the protected time.
Thank you, speaker, for your speech. With that, let me invite the second speaker of team opposition. Amrita, are you ready?
Yes, just give me a minute. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, start.
Greetings, I'm the second speaker from side opposition. My pronouns are she, her, and I prefer verbal POIs. Let me begin with something that the proposition seems to have no clarity about and isn't willing to understand as well. About the school shootings, let me recall a very recent issue, the South Texas school shooting issue where 19 innocent primary children were killed. And let me remind you that this isn't the first case that has occurred, that this case isn't the first of its kind. 17 school shootings have taken up so far, and we're only halfway past the year. And these 27 school shootings have taken in this year. So you understand the intensity of it. Now imagine if, as per your case scenario, if these guns were banned. Now, if these guns were banned, and say, for example, imagine how much more protection the faculty would be having and the students would be having if the faculty had access to guns, so that they can protect the lives of these children and them as well. So banning guns over here,
POI.
No, not now. So the proposition sees guns as a very so the proposition sees only one side of the guns, that is to kill people, while we also see it as a way of protection. So guns, now let me begin with something that so let me begin with the fact that it is not guns that kill people. It may sound very cliche, but it is people that kill people. So firearms are just a tool, and it depends on the person and how they utilize it, whether they want to utilize it for good or ill. And that's where my prime minister emphasized on the fact that when these guns are being provided, and in our model, we will ensure that people are being educated. Now, if there is a violence, if there is a shooting that is taking place, then there's a reason for that. The person has experienced a trauma. And the proposition was saying that over here the killing has more emphasis over the trauma. But then just 6 months of banning the gun sale and then trying to regulate the black market, which I will come to later on as the proposition mentioned and all of that, seems to be less efficient than a long-term scale of actually educating people, of spreading awareness and improving their mental state. So let me clarify. Not now. So over here, what we are proposing is that instead of banning guns as a whole, we need to address the root causes that drive people to go and perpetrate violence, including looking seriously whether the mental health system is performing as the way it should. Now, generally, we don't ban tools just because they're dangerous. Tens of thousands of Europeans die in car accidents every year. There are immense number of truck crashes, and the number of people that die there are immensely higher than the number of people that die in shootings. So terrorists have used cars, trucks, and what not to kill people, but yet we haven't banned cars and trucks, right? So it seems very unreasonable to say that guns need to be banned only for this reason. Now the Prime Minister mentioned something very beneficial for the opposition. They mentioned about the right to life and how that's a very fundamental right. So they mentioned that that the people have right to life, and that's why guns should be banned. About how just for personal safety, and how personal safety is less important as compared to about how terrorists use guns to kill people, or how people go about with that. So let me remind you, and they emphasize on societal safety. So a society is formed when each and every person over there is being safe. So you can't just take away. So what their prime minister emphasized was taking away guns from people who are using it for their safety only because somebody else who isn't in a mentally well state will go about and attack them. And the Prime Minister over here again mentioned something that absolutely doesn't seem to make sense. They mentioned that the makers of the Constitution gave people the access to guns, and they didn't ban them in the first place because they imagined that people wouldn't be utilizing it for wrong cases. Well, in that case, why didn't they imagine that? So they could have also imagined this, right? That people wouldn't be using bombs or nuclear weapons for the wrong purposes. So the reason that they haven't banned guns in the first place, and they weren't as dumb as the proposition claims them to be. So there's a reason why guns have been given access to people, so that they can use it for their safety. So when the society is safe as a whole, that's when a country becomes, when each and every person in the society is safe, that's when a country and together as the international community, we're safe. And the Prime Minister in their speech mentioned that, and also the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned that they will be regulating the black market. When have you been successful in regulating the black market?
POI.
Hold on, I shall take it on later on. So they said that the makers of guns are somewhere. So if you stop, so if you put a ban on them, then eventually you wouldn't be. So eventually the black market wouldn't have access to it. So the makers of the guns are essentially the government here. Are you trying to say that the government is the one who is trying to give guns and over there, and eventually you would be able to regulate the black market? So the idea of regulating the black market is fairly unreasonable over here. So in your best case scenario, guns are banned, people don't have access to guns. So if not here, they will turn up to the black market, right? So if guns are legally banned, that opens up a whole new area for the black market. And your idea of safety of providing pallet guns, now how would a bullet made of rubber save somebody from a bullet that's coming from metal? It's like saying that, oh, dear shooter, please hold on for a minute. Let me take my rubber gun and I'll use it for that, and I'll use that for my safety. And so we are fairly against that. And the side proposition also mentioned that in our side, uh, that over here anybody can buy guns. However, our prime minister has clearly mentioned that anybody cannot buy guns. They have to go through a process of testing, and then even and only then can they have access to guns. Yes, I'll take your POI now. Hello.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that car accidents, it's much more easier to get a gun rather than 100 kgs of C4 and explosives with the truck. I don't think you realize that. And the point which you mentioned about teachers, a person coming in with the AK-47, do you think a teacher is going to stand with a simple pistol and try and shoot that person? What will the teacher do? The teacher will run.
So
These are illogical arguments.
Yeah, sir, I got you. I got your question. So our prime minister also mentioned this, that the people who will be getting guns are also subjected to a series of training over here that ensures them basic self-defense, right? So as the teacher, it is their responsibility to protect the students. So if not to the extent that they can completely protect everyone, at least the lives of few innocent children would be saved, right? And as you mentioned that your police is highly efficient, they will come by that time, at least for now, if the faculty has access to guns, and that's what we mentioned. So thus I rest my case, but not my stance, and I'm very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. With that, let me invite the third speaker of team proposition. Vineet, are you ready?
Just a second. Just let me set the timer. So that I have a. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, start. Warm greetings to one and all. This is Proposition Whip here, who firmly believes that guns should be banned. The side opposition has created a lot of illogical claims which really work in utopian world and fallacy in proving their point. And I would like to highlight all of these and sum up the whole debate in 5 major points of flashes, and then conclude our side of the debate and show that why we are better than the other. Now, regarding the POIs, I would entertain all the POIs through chat, so don't need to disturb in between. So to begin with, the first major point of flash is regarding safety and protection. So let's understand this. The opposition are saying that you are allowing people to control guns through a process, that psychological test or renewal for after 6 months, comprehensive background checks, etc., etc., etc. Now, let me give you one simple scenario to prove everything wrong. Right? If a person who is an immediate threat, who is under immediate threat, will go through so much process just to carry a gun, within that process maybe he can get killed, right? So what safety are you talking about? If I'm under immediate threat, I have to go under so much rigorous training of learning how to use it and anything, and someone comes and shoots me right at that very second. So that this whole long process just seems very illogical from their side. Apart from that, we are clearly saying that we are providing a better alternative, such as pellet guns. Now, what the opposition isn't realizing is the fact that we are using pellet guns. So they are saying if someone is carrying an AK-47 in front of you and you are going to protect yourself with pellet guns, understand that if we ban guns, that person won't be having AK-47 at the first place. I don't know where this whole thing came up in their mind. Okay, and regarding pellet guns, it can break people's bones, as clearly been mentioned, and it is much easier accessible and easy to learn by people, so that if I have an immediate threat, I don't need to wait for 2 months to get a pellet gun and then protect myself. I can get it very easily through passing a number of tests. And we are in still pellet guns also we are providing a regulation. So I don't know where this whole thing came. And this leads to the second point of clash, which was black market. Yes, we do agree that, as clearly stated by the prime minister, that there is a large number of black market in the selling of guns. But you didn't clearly heard what our deputy prime minister said. If there is a regulation of not accessing guns, so then the government makes guns, and the people who are accessing it and selling it in the black market will reduce by such a large number. And this is going to help because the stats are very clear. Do you want me to repeat it again? Because there are so many people who are dying at this very second, right? And this leads me to this third point of clash, which is accessibility, right? So the thing is, if you are saying that a person who has faced abuse, we also sympathize with him.
we also say that you go carry on mental awareness programs. But what you are not understanding is you do not get to know who is going to become a potential terrorist. If you will get to know it in the first place, then there would not be a need of mental awareness programs, right? So we don't know who. Maybe I can go in a school and shoot 10 people. You never know who is going to do that. So who are you giving mental awareness, or whom are you teaching mental awareness? Yes, it is a very good thing that, and we strongly encourage it. Do mental awareness program in schools, do gun control program in schools, but it is not serving a basic purpose of protecting people. And I don't know why the opposition is clearly again and again saying mental health, mental health, mental health. We sympathize with them. But the thing is, like I clearly mentioned in my POI as well, that if I am being able to carry a gun, 10, shoot 10 people, and then I seek the refuge in mental health, I don't think so that any person, even the opposition, won't want it. Okay. And this leads me to the last point of clash, which was the ownership, regarding the ownership. We strongly believe that government should be the complete monopoly of handing out lethal guns for obvious reasons, because they are doing the production. Mostly production is done by them. And if it is under a check and balance control, then people would not have such a great access to it. And even the black market would get curbed. Now, I would like to summarize our whole points which are made by our side. Firstly, we gave a proper definition of guns and citizens. And that is very necessary because we didn't leave some vague terms for the opposition to point out. Apart from that, we also back everything by stats. And they are saying that school shootings are taking place. What is the root cause of that? The root cause is abuse. But the effect, if you are training that abuser, he will use those guns, right? If he, and you are saying that mental health awareness programs should be run, tell me, if I'm going to shoot someone, do you really think that I'm going to go to a psychologist first to say that, okay, I am a abuse facer and I need your help? No. If I would be of that mindset, why would I even carry a gun at the first place, right? So 27 school shootings have already taken place in 2022 in schools, and this is not even the overall shootings, and this is just the stats of America. Think about all the countries in the world. So that is why we need a strict gun control, and I don't know why they are not adhering to this. Apart from that, we also believe that it is a threat to fundamental right of life. They are saying that you are using it for self-protection and everything, self-defense and all that. But we are also saying that we are providing you with an alternative. So don't use these guns, lethal guns, use pellet guns, use soft guns, right? We are not banning them. We are making them accessible to you. We are making them affordable to you, right? So the basic sense of using a gun, you are saying, is to self-protection, and we are giving you an alternative to self-protection. So why do you even need lethal guns in the first place? Apart from that, we also believe that society is more important than individual, right? We see, let's consider a scenario where we agree with all of what you have said, right? I am a person who is an immense threat, right? And I am being targeted by many people, right? Now I can use a gun for my self-protection, but think about that child who in Texas had a gun and he killed it, and he killed so many innocent lives. And so this is when you need to realize that it's more about the society. If given a choice, I would sacrifice my gun to protect those 19 children. And who wouldn't? We all are saying mental health, we are all saying, but humanity runs overall. And I would sacrifice my life to save those 22 lives of other people as well. And everyone here will do that. And you know what? Like properly being stated by the Prime Minister, the thing is, you are traumatizing these people. There are so many less schools in the world. We are talking about United States, that's a developed country, right? Think about the people living in those areas where there are so many less schools. But even in United States, there have been so many school shootings that already have taken place. It is traumatizing people. It's not allowing children to move out of their house without fear. And they are in a situation where they are scared every single day. Imagine you wake up and you know that you are going to go to school, but you realize that if in school, you are not even being protected. And here comes our last point, that it's more of about security, providing, being provided to society rather than individual. And that is why we believe that if guns are banned, then the people who are accessing it, even through the black market, will reduce significantly in number. And in that manner, we are going to run a society efficiently and with more peace. And this is why the reason that why after Christchurch mosque shootings, gun laws were implemented in New Zealand, and they do have it. Just go on it and search. So I, at the proposition side, am strongly and in favor of banning guns, and I'm proud to propose. Thank you. Is there any time for a POI, or if there is a POI, then I would like to entertain it, and if I have the time.
Your time is in.
Okay, thank you.
With that, let me invite the third speaker of team opposition. Deepak Vyas, are you ready? Vyas, sorry, my bad. Vyas, you ready?
Yeah, so I just like to no, firstly, I'd like to make sure that I'm audible and visible. Can you see me
Yes, you are.
and hear me clearly? Okay. Okay, I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So across our cases, team opposition have in a way proven that guns can be dangerous, because across their speeches, what they've done is they've shot themselves in the leg. How is this so? In their very first speech, they told you that a very, very minor majority of criminals, only 10% of people who are actually intending to use these guns for a negative use, such as violence to perpetuate crime, actually get these guns from like the store, which means that majority of criminals don't actually get these guns from a retail store or get it from a place where it's commercially available, but rather from the black market, where places they cannot. And instead of by banning guns, they are actually allowing for the function of this black market. They are not trying to regulate guns at all. They are just allowing more and more people who actively want these guns to get them so that they can harm people. And this serves to be a fallacy that runs through their case. So I'll move on to my first class, which is which side actually reduces violence caused by guns. And in this, I'll also target their misconceptions regarding our whole black market narrative. We told you very clearly, guns keep people safe, and they are an inalienable right. They allow people to feel protected, they keep people safe, and they serve as the first line of defense in case of any crime, in case of any violence being perpetuated. Guns are there to protect them. But then they tell you, no, guns are weapons of harm. Since they're weapons of harm, they must always be used to perpetuate violence. Since they're designed for harm, the only thing they can do is harm, and we fundamentally disagree with this. No guns does not mean no violence. In the same way, all guns do not mean all violence. Guns can be used selectively for self-defense, and we believe that the majority of people who have guns are going to use for just right purposes to defend themselves. And how are we doing this? We're doing this via regulation. The problem is, on their side of the world, what they're telling you is by banning guns, they're getting rid of all the guns in the world. The problem with this is they don't recognize that the demand for guns cannot be substantive, meaning that people always possess a demand for guns that cannot be reduced. They are just getting rid of the gun, meaning the demand for guns will still exist, meaning they will go to illegal ways to get the same guns. Here we are giving you the guns in a very legal way, and to do this, we're regulating it extensively. We're giving you physiological checks, mental checks, psychological checks, physical tests, a renewal license in 6 months, which they thought I misinterpreted, but they rather got that wrong on my part. But rather, no, they're saying they're banning all guns, and therefore the demand for guns is directly going to go to the black market. People who want guns are now going to try and purchase it illegally for the sole purpose of harming people. On our side of the house, guns are going to be available to be purchased commercially, and that's going to be for commercial purposes. On their side, it's going to be to harm people. And then they tell you by banning guns, the black market is going to reduce because they're in a way regulating it. And this is a fundamental fallacy in their case. Take the example of drugs. Just because you ban drugs doesn't mean the black market for drugs automatically disappears. I think everybody knows that to be false, that drugs serve to be a thriving black market. Similarly, when you ban guns, there is going to be a thriving black market for drugs, for guns. I'm sorry, because you cannot purchase these guns in a legal method, they're still going to exist in an illegal method, and that serves to be a very, very dangerous. And this is where let's do some weighing on our side of the house. Even in our very worst case, where if our psychological tests fail, our physiological tests fail, and people still use these guns to perpetuate violence, which is the very, very worst case, which is highly unlikely to happen, they're still being regulated, and therefore the violence would reduce a little bit. Whereas on their best case, their very best case, their best case tells you they're getting rid of all the guns. They can still never actually get rid of the demand for guns. And therefore, these guns are still going to be purchased illegally, and there's still going to be mass shootings, killings in an illegal method, which they cannot regulate. So our worst case is still better than their best case. I'll take a POI now. If there's nothing, I'll move on with my speech.
Yeah, I have a POI.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the black market is still open. I clearly mentioned in my speech that the black market guns come from normal people who buy guns from the government and then supply them to the black market. There's no way of identifying these people. So when in our side there are no guns at all,
that's a massive
what will you
fallacy.
do?
That's a massive fallacy. You're still going to be producing guns. You said that you're okay with guns being there for law enforcement entities. And also, I don't think any government allows for the sanctions and producing of drugs, right? That doesn't mean drugs don't exist. That doesn't mean the black market for drugs don't exist. That's a massive fallacy on your part. Just because you're trying to make guns not commercially available doesn't mean you're getting rid of guns at all. You're not trying to go ahead and destroy the technology as a whole. That's not possible. So for you to say, oh, we're not manufacturing guns for the public, that means the black market will not exist. That's completely false. That's actually a massive logical fallacy on our part. We don't understand that argument because it doesn't make sense in the first place. Now moving on to the second class, which is which side provides for greater civilian safety. We will once again tell you, guns are for self-defense and self-defense solely. They are used so that firstly, it's a mental benefit too. When you have guns, you can sleep soundly, knowing that you have your first line of defense right in the drawer next to you. You know you can use the gun. You can rely on it for your safety. But they tell you that you can use law enforcement. It said that law enforcement is a better alternative to these guns, and if not for that, law enforcement can't do anything. They do recognize that these law enforcements are not very effective, right? Because if you're being robbed or in a current bank robbery situation, you are not going to tell the bank robbers to wait. Oh, please wait 1 minute. Let me call the police. That's not how it works. When you're in a situation that directly threatens your physiological existence, where your life is in danger, you cannot wait for the police to come because your life is in danger. The first way you defend yourself is a way where you can actually defend yourself using guns. That's the best way you can. You cannot wait for the police or wait for actual action to happen, because that's not how the real world works. We allow for actual action and people to actually use guns for self-defense. Then they give you their alternative of airsoft pellet guns, where they have zero research or scientific proof on the technology of airsoft guns. I don't think they know for a fact that these airsoft guns are not, the technology behind these airsoft guns is not very developed yet. That is still in its development phase. And even so, they tell you these airsoft guns can break bones. I'm pretty sure that's not true. They are not capable of breaking bones or anything. And even so, a real gun does the job much, much better. And even though an airsoft gun might be able to hinder a criminal for a while, it will, as I said, it will only be able to hinder the criminal, not completely stop him from committing the crime. We give you an alternative, which is actual guns, which can actually stop criminals as they are committing the crime, rather than waiting for police to come or using these pathetic alternatives of airsoft guns, which completely do not work under the scope of this debate. And then we told you the benefits of banning guns. When you're banning guns, the de-benefits of banning guns. When you're banning guns, you have to spend a lot of money on the gun regulation. You have to spend money to make sure that nobody has guns, that no industry is illegally producing guns. To eradicate the black market, you have to spend a lot of money. On our side of the world, we allow for guns. We're spending money on two sectors. Firstly, we're spending money on regulating the existence of these guns, which is much, much easier since the government directly controls the inflow and outflow of these guns, because we are directly allowing for the existence of these guns. And secondly, more importantly, we are allowing for mental health and mental diagnosis of issues that in the first place caused the gun violence to be perpetuated. But gun violence won't be perpetuated because we're targeting the root cause. The root cause here is the existence of mental and physical abuse, of trauma within people. We're targeting this trauma, making sure that they do not feel unwanted, they feel safe and comfortable, rather than getting rid of their tools of protection. And finally, I'd like to take the third class quickly, which is about, is regulation possible? They tell you that no regulation is possible, that is impossible to detect. They told you that, oh, anybody can go ahead and perpetuate school violence. I can tell you for a fact, no, not everybody can perpetuate school violence. There are psychological tests and cues for people with psychological disorders, trauma, stressing. For example, the kid in Texas, if there was proper regulation, then the gun would have never even ended up in his hands, because regulation is possible, it exists. We live in the 21st century. The brain scans was just an example to show how advanced we are in terms of psychological studies. There exist psychological cues and tests we can conduct to detect whether a person is undergoing severe trauma or PTSD or brain lapses or problems in their physical and mental well-being, and this can be easily detected, including. And apart from that, they give you the entire immediate need, where they say, okay, you immediately need something, you cannot get it, and sorry, this protected time, so I cannot accept any POIs. And they tell you that if you immediately need a gun, you cannot get it immediately. In your side of the world, there is no gun, so that doesn't make any sense. And they also give you no countermodel to that, so that doesn't make sense. So all in all, I'd like to say that if you are ever planning to remove guns from people who need it, the most vulnerable communities, these people will get triggered, pun intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. With that, let me invite the reply speaker from team opposition. Ved, are you ready?
Right, sir. Just a second. Okay, so again, restating that I'll be accepting. Just a clarification: are there POIs in the reply speech?
No, no
Okay,
POI.
cool.
Our
Amazing.
duration is 4 minutes.
Amazing. Okay, so okay, starting at the self count of 3, 2, 1. Now I'll be conducting my reply speech in a manner of sum ups. 3 major sum ups here. So very first sum up goes to the argumentation of the whole black market thing. So now essentially the proposition argued that the black market essentially that we'll ban guns and the black market won't exist because majority of the black market supply comes from the commercial selling of guns, and essentially there won't be any school shootings or gun violence there. Now we have the opposition has argued somewhere along the lines of very first thing that the guns are not the root cause of gun violence or school shootings there. Trauma is, and we have used this info to build our preventive model there. Now our second argumentation along these lines has been that black market will still exist if you ban guns, because well, it exists in countries which have banned commercial use of guns, and it exists very thrivingly. And essentially black market, what the proposition stated, that the major source of black market for getting guns is the commercial source, where we have argued that by giving the example of the whole marijuana, the drug scenario there, thriving black market existing there, as well as stating that there are several other sources which account for more black market selling of guns, such as there are military producers of guns essentially who transfer guns to the black market accessories. So essentially that is the sum up for the very first black market argument. The second sum up goes to the model presented by both sides. Now essentially the proposition presented no or little model. So what they presented was they'll essentially ban guns for 6 months, and then they'll put into motion a buyback or a rather an exchange program, basically which converts lethal guns to rubber or pellet guns. Now what they fail to basically tell here that why would a public who feels unsafe and recognizes needs for self-defense engage in such a program? Whereas the opposition, we presented a very comprehensive 3-parted model where we started by recognizing the rational users through a preventive model, a psychological test, comprehensive background checks, etc. Then we moved on to gun awareness and community awareness programs here. Then we moved on to mental health for school students as a preventive model, that when you give them mental health, why would they manifest their trauma, their abuses, their issues through a manifestation of gun violence? Essentially that manifestation won't happen. That was our argument there. Now essentially moving on to the third sum up argument. Now a proposition argued that right to life in the sense, proposition argued the right to life in the sense that banning guns would make the society safe and there would be far less death. The opposition provided certain rebuttals for that, essentially that banning guns won't remove the guns from the in their total entirety from the street market, because here the opposition argument comes that demand for guns won't reduce, people will resort to illegal means, and the opposition strongly argued right to life here as being only possible for the civilian population to attain through the right to self-defense. Thus, stating all these three, summing up all these three major argumentation domains, the reply speaker is proud to say that the opposition takes the debate here. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. With that, let me ask the last speaker, the reply speaker from Team Proposition. Rishit, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can I start?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1, start.
Greetings, everyone. I'd like to address the arguments the opposition side proposed. First argument is essentially that even in nations where guns are banned, gun violence exists. However, in nations with a ban on gun possession, gun violence is far less. In India, about 10 out of 100 homicides are due to guns, whereas in the US, nearly 53 people faced their end at the end of a battle in 2020. Perhaps gun violence can't be eradicated due to a ban, but up to you to choose which death rate would you rather have. Second argument was essentially about awareness programs and about developing rationality among citizens. Great motive, great agenda, noble idea, but almost impossible to implement. Take this with any scenario. That's why even focus on guns themselves. We all know junk food is linked to severe diseases like obesity, but companies like McDonald's have revenues of nearly $20 billion in a single financial year. Smoking is almost guaranteed to kill you. Yet cigarette companies had a combined profit of $62 billion in 2018. Remember, not revenue, just pure profit. My point is that while such awareness programs will likely have an impact, and will be helpful to reduce gun violence, they will nowhere be nearly as effective as a complete ban will be. Third argument is essentially that we should address mental health issues. This goes back to my argument of this option calling the second argument. I would like to counter this in the argument of the fact that individual security cannot come at the cost of danger to society in general. The argument that people require devices to protect themselves is rational and justified, for it holds basis in perhaps the most fundamental right, the right to life. However, the argument that this very device, which is supposed to protect our lives, is also capable of taking lives of others, is irrational. We cannot grant citizens the ability to hold devices that protect themselves, but also grant them the ability to snatch away the fundamental rights of others, especially the right to life. Is irrespective of how mentally trained and capable they are, one mishap can cause damage to entire communities and damage to economies as well. Fourth argument was essentially the fact that metal guns are more effective to pellet guns, and hence pellet guns are essentially useless. This argument is straight up laughable. Pellet guns have the ability to blind individuals, break teeth, penetrate the epidermis of the human skin, and fracture bones. I can't imagine a shooter whose eyes have just been blinded would any further attempt to shoot you. Fifth argument was a core argument for their side. The argument of safety that guns provide to citizens. A meta-analysis, however, found strong evidence for increased odds of suicide among persons with access to firearms compared with those without access, and moderate evidence for an attenuated increased odds of homicide victimization when persons with and without access to firearms were compared. Children between the ages of 5 and 14 are 11 times more likely to be killed as guns in the US as compared to countries with less guns. For example, India. Moreover, it is also shown that in the event of mass shootings, armed citizens could actually make the situation worse by confusing first responders and people around them about who the shooter is. Imagine there are 5 people in a mass shooting, and one is the actual perpetrator, and 4 people who have guns, and the police are like, who are supposed to shoot? The innocent citizens or the perpetrator themselves? And how are they supposed to identify them? A big question. Sixth argument was that banning will not address the black market. Well, first of all, it's hilarious the opposition fails to recognize that the 10% reduction we quoted will itself be a big number. It's almost like the opposition does not want this 10% reduction. They also use the analogy of the drug black market, saying that the drug black market still exists even though drugs are banned. What they fail, again, this is logically fallacious because they fail to recognize the amount of drug abuse that could happen within an economy and a country if the legalization of drugs took place. They also countered a model by saying that why would people participate in such a buyback program? Well, it's simple. It's mandated by law, and again, the government holds records about guns and can use investigations to find out which people illegally or legally own guns or not. Also, a third speaker of the opposition said that pellet guns can't break bones. I don't even have to draw analogies for this to show you how inaccurate this is. It's just facts. Pellet guns generally fire at a speed of 550 seconds per second, whereas a speed of just 200 feet per second can fracture bones. The opposition themselves are not clear with the facts. I'll conclude in just my last statement. We believe we won the debate because of the fact that we managed to dissect scenarios properly and focus solely on the effects of guns in society. The opposition has gone on and on about cause and intent, but no one cares about this. A mentally ill individual and a mentally sound individual can both shoot a child, but the grief for the community and the grief for the family will be the same. We also believe we won the debate because our arguments are focused on practicality, not unnecessary bureaucracy and funding of programs which cost millions of dollars in taxpayer money but have no necessary or projected outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for your speech. Give us some time to recall, to give the verdict. So it's 10. Give me at least 13 minutes. We'll back in 30.
Should we join the meeting or will you just give us the result on the?
We'll share the result over here in 13. If you have another thing to join, your team member can stay here.
Sir, we also wanted personal feedback. So
we have 3-3.
This meeting is being recorded.
It's short of the time, so let me just directly go to the verdict. Again, so it's a debate. It's actually being played out in different country differently, I believe so. The more understanding, at least for this motion, which everyone's come to the mind, is primarily the US. because all the stories that everyone, including the adjudicator here, is much about the US. And the examples you quote again come from there. Otherwise, the country, I'm not able to see any country which have this much gun violence. At least it's not in the news, even if there's a country like that. So that's the first, I have a personal preference bias in terms of giving the verdict, because I understand that much more as compared to any other examples. So that's the underlying assumption and underlying sort of biasness that I have given to the verdict. And with that, my verdict go to the team opposition. In a sense, who was there in the team, team two, with Amrita Vyas. And in terms of justification, look, obviously a lot of things were being uh, taken care of. But fundamentally, one is your effectiveness, the approach of your, like, ultimately what we are looking to do. We are looking to do, create a model, whatever your policy, which eventually decrease the violence which is happening today. So that's our ultimate objective. That's both the sides trying to look. But at the same time, when we propose a policy, whatever that is, we have to actually, like, how much actually it's possible to make it real on the ground. You can have, say, for example, it's easy to have a outright ban. I'm not saying, there is a kind of policy framework designed by the team proposition, but at the same time, the loop that they get into it is this idea of black market, which they were not able to go ahead and break it. Because for you to implement this kind of massive restructuring, where people have the guns, people have 80 to 90% of the guns currently with them, how will you ask them to give it back? And as the other speakers mentioned, the second and third speaker of team opposition, that it create mass hysteria against the people will be willing to buy more guns. And now, rather than buying from the main area, the main retail stores by the government, they will go ahead and buy it from the illegal market. And the legal market is anyway for any country is very hard to control, regulate. And US is again, as someone given the example of drug, it's really, really difficult. And for you to quote that we will able to control black market, illegal market, it's very challenging. And especially when people, you're trying to take it away, they will try to buy it more. How will you again get this idea that they will give it what they already have? So maybe you can outright ban what they will buy tomorrow, but what already the number of guns that already exist in the system is quite high. I'm not looking that they will come to you and give it, openly. So that's going to be massive challenge, which I think that the team proposition was not able to engage and try to showcase me that their model, though no matter may decrease the violence, but seems practical on the ground. So that's, I guess, for me is the fundamental reason for giving to the verdict to the team opposition. But at the same time, there was lot of flaws or challenges with the model proposed by the team opposition. Especially they talk about three things: then how they will decrease the violence from the current state, because essentially they are status quo. What they are is a better modeling of a status quo, that they will have better awareness program, education, how to use gun and all, and more importantly in terms of psychometric analysis, which is a preventive healthcare they're talking about. The team opposition do mention that it's really also very practical to happen, because you are talking about doing this kind of psychoanalysis for everyone, and for that the current infrastructure is not there. And you are talking about preventive. We have to look again that how much effective these preventive measures are. Like, are they like 80%, 90%? How much, up to what percent you can predict that this one is a potential criminal, or it is a potential violent criminal, can go ahead and do the criminal? How much the effectiveness lies? Though obviously the team proposition or team opposition talk about that we are in 21st century and we improved, but still it's not 100%. So it's a question mark over there. And second idea, even if it's 100%, the idea is that the technology required to make it 100%, you need to have brain mapping, which you can't do for each and every one. So it's again not very plausible. But in terms of comparative analysis, for system to work, I think it's very difficult for people to just give away the gun. You need to create a better model. You need to showcase me that this is what seems very plausible on the ground. With that, that's like, that's my case.
Sir.
Yeah.
So if we had to give the model of way to take away guns from the public and then give them pellet guns in exchange? How should we frame it that it's practically possible?
Look, so obviously you have to give this idea of you want to outright ban the guns. That's very much you have to do. I'm not into much of the pellet gun. I don't know the effectiveness of that, so I will not come to that. You need to talk about and you need to give a framework in terms of you can't do this outright ban. So you have to have some sort of timeline policy that you will go gradually to that level.
Sir, we mentioned that in a period of 6 months.
Yeah, so again the 6 months is again a very less amount of time, and again the challenge lies that people who are afraid today, for them this is a purpose of security. How will you ensure, look what your model is creating, your model creating a bizarre word that people who might be they are not looking to use guns, they will give you guns back. But what about the people who have the reasons, and these are the people who we want to take away the guns. So how will you go ahead and take away the guns from the people who are potential criminals? They will not come you and tell you, look, we are looking to utilize it or we have utilized in the past.
Sir,
So
could we
solving the most vulnerable or most, in your case, most active gun user or potential gun users, how will you solve for them? They will not say that we are going to use it, the pellet gun.
Sir, could we mention that, say, like every person who buys a gun, like especially in the US, all of them are currently registered with the government, at least most of them. So if we track those users from those records, is that more possible? Would that be a better thing
Look,
to
so
say?
basically you're saying that out of say 100% people who own gun today, 90% are currently registered with the government. So we have this data, we know which one have the guns. Now what you will do to take away their guns? Will you go to their home and say, give me your gun? Is that your policy?
Sir, maybe that could either be done or I think yes. But that's why I've given a 6 months period.
Mhm.
So, because
Sir, in this scenario, I had a case in mind. For example, when we took
Vineet, you're muted.
I guess you are asking the question. Okay, so I had in mind, sir, that for example, the demonetization that took place in India, right? So people were said, okay, for in a month span of, for example, 6 months, you have to surrender the notes and get them exchanged, or else if you found with them, they are of no use, right? So, sir, in this scenario, can we say that for a period of, you say, 2 years, people are allowed to go and surrender their guns, right? And in exchange, like the program that we suggested, that psychological test should be taken place, and then valid these soft guns should be given to them in exchange for their protection, right, sir? And if someone found guilty of possessing a gun in that manner, he or she will have to face severe consequences. For example, 5 years in prison or a particular amount that he or she has to pay, which we will monitor through the registration, official registrations of the guns that are there in the market.
Or the government could just stop producing bullets which are compatible with the guns previously produced.
Yeah, so obviously you can go ahead and do that analysis. And second, to your point of demonetization, I agree. Look, I'm not saying that outright ban is not impossible to happen. Is that you have to make a much more persuasive ground for that. Even if you look at demonetization, it's the only case in such a long span of history of India. So these right of outright ban do happen, but for them, the government need to ensure that they have a policy, sufficient policy. Otherwise, there's going to be massive struggle. Now, in case of India, one, India is not as pro-gun society as America is. But let's case if that's the case. In case of monetization, if you are angry with the system or you don't want to take it, this what the system is ensuring that your money will not be recognized by the system, so you don't have any alternative. Do you see what is happening to you? The incentive, look what the government is doing. Look, leave one is a suffering implementation side, but what is saying that even if I have the illegal money today in terms of cash, if I don't surrender, then I don't have an alternative to lose my money. The other alternative, even the government provide that if I give them money, they will take 30-40% and make it white. There was a policy coming around that same time. In this case, what you need to prove and really think on that how will you incentivize people to give away their guns if that you are looking for in a span of 6 months that you propose for. You understand the difference? The government do include when they even talk about demonetization. Otherwise, it would have failed if there was no incentive for people to surrender their money. And that's why they have to
Yes, sir,
outright
we get
discard
it.
the previous money. In your case, you can't outright discard the previous guns because anyway they will be used. And if they hide away, you know what you will do. They will say, "I lost my gun." What would happen? Obviously, this is not the case. The analysis didn't go that further, but it's really hard, in my understanding, to go ahead and on the other line, like it's a US in which I find it really difficult for people to give away. Had it been India, it's not a uh, pro gun society. So the question is like stop even one step prior. Yeah, that's the case. Now, in terms of, uh, I hope that helps. I guess we can do further analysis. Maybe we will meet tomorrow. We will have a match tomorrow anyway for the other
Sir,
teams.
Yes.
actually, if you could give like brief speaker to speaker feedback, just a brief feedback.
Sir,
Yes,
before
sir.
that, can you just give us our individual scores?
Look, so individual scores will not matter much. What I was primarily taking down your notes. I can do that. Maybe I will try to give you voice note, or if you have another match, or you can come tomorrow in the match. So I will give you the feedback tomorrow. Is that okay? The
Yes,
same
sir.
same
That's okay.
timing after the another match.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sure, sir.
We'll come after the match. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
after or at least 15 minutes prior. Both way works for me.
Okay,
Okay.
sir. We will
So,
try
sir,
and
Thank you.
for the
Yeah, because we
personal
have not
feedback, right?
we have not planned for today's match. It's that I guess the team two went on to talk about that they want to do match today. That's why we sort of entertained the match today, because
Sir,
otherwise Sunday
is it possible if we could do one more tomorrow morning also?
look, again, it's very difficult because the number of adjudicators. I have to put my personal timing for here as compared to what otherwise I would have been doing. So let me
Yes, sir.
just think. Maybe not morning, but in the evening I can try.
We have a debate
Tomorrow.
in the evening.
So we have
Sir,
30, 31st we have already given.
yes, sir.
Let me see if we can do a matches on first and second.
All right,
also,
sir.
I don't